So Nick Staples, the CEO of Locate Bio. There's a clicker. So we're a UK-based private company developing advanced medicines that really looking at combination therapy for complicated tissue microenvironments. Our lead two programs are high-value spine therapeutic programs, one for spinal fusion, one for degenerative disc disease, and also starting to move into the oncology space, where again we have several approaches to address tumor microenvironments. I know the golden rule is not to say you're fundraising. We're fundraising. We're currently raising a Series A, so a 7 million Series A, and I'll touch on that also. So what do? We do novel combination therapies, really based on two technologies that have been developed in-house for the delivery of cells and bioactives, and also for the delivery of DNA and RNA. And we actually bring those two technologies together to start to address, could be called regenerative medicine, or even potentially degenerative medicine in the case of tumors, where we're very much looking at addressing cells, signals, and the physical environment, so the matrix and the fluid. And to get appropriate tissue regeneration, you really need to address all three of those. It really depends on the microenvironment, but certainly addressing two of those, is our view, is the optimal way to approach regenerative medicine. This is all based on 20 years of academic research from our CSO and founder, Professor Kevin Shakespeare at the University of Nottingham, and one of the leading lights in the regenerative medicine space over the last 20 years. So the pipeline, lead two programs I mentioned are in spinal applications. These are therapeutics. The lead program is the next generation BMP2. So essentially it's a growth factor that helps to grow bone where you need new bone to grow in spinal fusions, and I'll touch on that. We have an advanced formulation of the product, and now we're looking to raise the funds to take it through preclinical development to clinic ready, to start clinical development early 2022. We also have an enhanced cell therapy approach for degenerative disc disease. Unlike some competitors are already in the clinic with stem cell only approaches, we're actually looking at creating the right niche for our cells to get a more of a disease modifying effect. And also starting, as I mentioned, to look at the oncology area, we see opportunities and potential partnering opportunities to target the tumor microenvironment and potentially to start delivering IO cells, so things like CAR T cells, locally to those tumors. Evidence suggests that does give an improved effect. And again, we can start to address other components of that difficult microenvironment. So our lead program, it's next generation BMP2. BMP2 is effectively the growth factor that grows bone, bone morphogenetic protein. In and of itself, it doesn't grow bone. You have to create that environment, so you have to provide a scaffold. And what we have through our technology is injectable, high macroporosity, so it's a very, very porous scaffold that gently sets, so it's injectable, it gently sets at body temperature, forms a hard scaffold, and that creates the environment really for cells to then start to attach and to grow bone. And when the job's done, it just naturally reabsorbs. And effectively, our product is delivering the BMP2 through our injectable tissue scaffold and uses endogenous cells to really grow that bone. Why I get excited? It's a big market, and really it's a big market, I think, with a lot of opportunity. So the whole space for bone graft substitutes, it's just over $3 billion globally. And it's really dominated by one product, which is Medtronic's Infuse. Despite some very obvious product weaknesses, it still generates over $500 million in sales, despite some what we think are key product weaknesses. I'll touch on that. And it's only really available in the US. Sales in Europe are low, and it's not approved in Japan as well. So although it's the dominant product in the market, we think there's actually a lot of room for a next generation approach. And when we talk to spinal surgeons, we ask them about the needs in the market and the needs in working with Infuse. They really come back to three key aspects. One is safety. BMP2 is a powerful growth factor that grows bone. And if you don't contain it, you don't use it appropriately, it will grow bone. So containing it and avoiding potential safety issues around the use of BMP2 is a key concern for surgeons. And of course, in some markets, also like Japan, they don't want to use a bovine collagen sponge. The second one is that handling. And again, Infuse is essentially a collagen sponge. You take the lyophilized growth factor, you reconstitute it, you pour it on the sponge, leave it 15 minutes, and when you pick it up, it essentially starts to drip, and you have to use tweezers. It really isn't very usable. You have to then manipulate that to pack a cage that provides the structural support in these spinal fusions. And the feedback from the market is technicians really don't like working with the product. It's also not injectable. And the big move now in the US in particular is to move to day center surgery and minimally invasive surgery. So there's a need for an injectable formulation. And despite these product weaknesses, it's still got really, I think, a commanding market price of about $5,000, which for most surgeons is a little bit out of reach, and particularly, I think, considering the other weaknesses that the product has. So our approach is really to deliver our BMP2 using our injectable scaffold to get a sustained release profile. So we deliver our BMP2 over 30 days. We deliver it in a format that is very usable. So it's injectable putty. You can inject it either into the spine or into a container and then start to literally pick the product up and start to work it as a putty. So it gives good utility. And we can address the price, and the market feedback is an optimal price would be $2,500, and feedback from industry players has said it would be market disruptive. At that sort of pricing, most of this market here, you can't see the details, but trust me, there's bone graft substitutes and allograft in there. They would essentially move over to what is almost recognized as the gold standard product if you can actually get the right product profile. So for us, it's very much about execution. What does it really all boil down to? Well, for us, it boils down to this graph, which is the blank control is just our scaffold. Infuse is the marketed product, but it's essentially the collagen sponge with Medtronic's BMP2 at their standard dose for this model. And in the third column, you can see that effectively we get the same efficacy at 1/10 of the dose. What we also see as well, you're probably not familiar with these graphs on the left, is effectively we get very good quality bone because we have BMP2 embedded and encapsulated in our scaffold, and so we get very consistent bone rather than what you often see with some other approaches, which is a halo effect with poor bone in the middle. So we've got lower BMP2, better handling, good quality bone formation, and really, I think, a lot of room to be aggressive on price. So where are we? Well, the Series A for us is all about execution. It's about getting this product now through to being clinic ready. We think the route to market is very clear. There's a lot of precedent, not only from Medtronic's Infuse, but also from other potential growth factor products. And it will be regulated, we think, as a device, but very clearly there is a drug component in there. And actually that is very beneficial. What we would be required to do is a small patient pilot study, leading into a single registration study, which I think by most drug development plans is actually quite a manageable number of patients. So we're looking at potentially market approval from 2025. For us, the clinical work would be under a Series B. We do expect to have industry participation based on the initial interest we've had to date. So for us, we think this is a clear shot on goal, and it's all about execution. So our second program is also in the spine space. It's degenerative disc disease. I don't have a pointer, but you can see it's a chronic progressive disease where essentially the intervertebral disc starts to degenerate to the point it effectively collapses, and these patients have huge amounts of pain, chronic pain, and at that point, the only thing you can do for them is to fuse their spines. So this is where the spinal fusion program comes in. Grade 2, grade 3, these patients are in chronic pain. It's a reason for half of the opiate usage in the US. It's a slippery slope. There's no disease-modifying treatments. In fact, there are very few treatments, full stop. The invertebral disc space, it's almost an enclosed space. It's hypoxic, it's acidic, it's immune privileged, and really you can't get drugs into it, and certainly you can't inject into it too often because it starts to rupture the disc itself. So it's actually a very difficult space to work in, and what it really cries out for is a regenerative medicine approach. Single therapies that are going to have disease-modifying effects. And our approach is based on the academic work of our CSO, is the delivery of stem cells, the delivery of the growth factors, and we've published on GDF6, but also looking at other bioactives in the mix, to really start to address what is the underlying pathophysiology, to create the environment for those cells to actually, we think, have a proper effect, and delivered through our injectable tissue matrix. Now, interestingly, competitors are actually taking these approaches, but individually. Some companies are just giving medical devices for essentially pumping up through gels the vertebral disc. Some companies look to growth factors on their own, and some companies, Dysgenics, Mesoblast, are going in with cell-only approaches. But because of this complex tissue microenvironment, we think just putting the cells in, or any one of those approaches, isn't going to be enough to really arrest the condition. So we want to go and address the anabolic, catabolic side, and also deliver the cells. And you'll see, oh, you won't see, that's in the longer meeting deck. This is also, we've got academic work to date showing we can deliver the stem cells and the GDF6, that we get good outcomes. But because this is essentially going to be almost a preventative medicine, it will address pain, but commercially we think this has to really be disease modifying and slow down or prevent the progression of disease. We want a very powerful shot on goal. So we are taking time now to optimize the program, and then we're looking at in vivo proof of concept with a new formulation under the Series A. So the risk of being ahead of time, the last space is a new space to us. So it's oncology, and it's addressing the tumor microenvironment. She has many similarities actually with the invertebrate disc space: hypoxic, acidic, somewhat immune privileged. At least hard for cells to get into it and stay there. And we think, again, it really comes back to that there's fundamental issues of cells, signals, and physical environment. And clearly, one of the issues is getting cells into these tumors, and people have looked at local delivery of things like CAR-T, and shown that if you do give a local dose, and surprisingly, you get better outcomes. And it may simply because you're overcoming the trafficking, and maybe the high volume of cells is starting to overcome some of the immunosuppression. But once the cells are in that environment, they are in a harsh environment. You've got all the immunosuppressive myeloid suppressor cells, you've got hypoxia, you've got all the acidification. And so what we're looking at in our cancer program are rational strategies of combinations to address the tumor microenvironment with or without delivering cells as well. So it's very much about delivering the cells, creating the right environment, or potentially making that environment permissive for the body's own cells to actually start to resolve the tumor. It's early stage, we are looking at potentially collaborations in this space, but under the Series A, we would like to effectively generate more data in the space, and we're getting a good industry reception from it. So the Fundraise, really I think we've got two very strong lead programs. We have an exciting opportunity in oncology. We've received $4 million of finance from Mercy over the last 2 years. We're now formally raising a Series A to get us clinic ready for the lead program, really have a final formulation to take forward for development for the degenerative disc, and to generate hopefully in vivo proof of concept in oncology as well. That should set us up for a strong Series B in 2021. So that's very much the story. We think it's quite focused. We think it's an area that we think is highly investable. We think tissue microenvironments and regenerative medicine will take combination approaches. We think this is probably the optimal approach. And within the kit bag, we have cell therapy, we have the potential for gene therapy, and as you can see, we've a long history in delivering biologics and small molecules.